Welcome on into the Fantasy Football Forge. My name's Steve, and today we are going to be looking at the late round draft picks. If you're picking from picks 9, 10, 11, 12 in a 12-team league, this is the final video of this series. I've done videos on the middle, early portions of the 12-team strategy, as well as the same for all 10-team strategies, so go check those out if any of those are relevant to you in any of your leagues. For more of this, I just realized, let me get a little more light on me. All right, there we go. That's a little bit better. So, hey, you can go up on the website. There's a link in the description to the my rankings, my up-to-date rankings. You can find all those up on www.theFFForge.com, as well as a draft sheet. If you scroll down on the front page or at the top of the rankings page that you will be brought to, there's a very clear thing that you can click on, and that'll get you a bar sheet, which you could use in any kind of home draft if you are drafting not online, and that, of course, is representative of my rankings. So, little description of what you're looking at. This color coding ADPs are, so the players that are on here are all derived from, based on ADPs, based on players who are most likely to be available to you based on those ADPs from both Fantasy Pros and Sleeper. And so when I looked at those, that's how we get the color coding system when we're looking at this rounds 5 and 6. Anybody in yellow means that their ADP was somewhere between 54 to 64.9. Anybody in green, 65 to 66.9, 67 to 68.9 for likely, and then down the same way here for questionable or doubtful in terms of their availability. And all players within this range on at least one of those two platforms are going to be on this list as of the time that I created. Of course, ADPs will continue to change as more information comes out on players, but that's how this list is created. And then, for instance, Teteroa McMillan here, he is going from orange to yellow, which means that on one of the platforms he had an ADP between 55 to 56.9, and on the other platform between 57 and 64.9. So that is how this works. Let's get on into it. When we look at what kind of strategy we're to create, the first thing that I've been looking at quite often has been going through the tight ends and the quarterbacks and determining, is there a spot where I feel they're most likely to be there and where I'm comfortable to be there, and that typically is going to be at this group, especially for, it depends where the group is, depending on where you're drafting and everything. But like, these are the names that I'm typically going to be looking for, because I think there's too many other players that I want compared to grabbing a tight end at this point for Brock Bowers. But if you are a Brock Bowers guy, there you go. He can be available for you there. It's just not the strategy that I'm going to recommend. But when we look at the quarterbacks and the tight ends, very clearly, this group, somebody's supposed to be available for you typically, so that's nice, and I would love if it were to be George Kittle. So my plan, based on the ADPs as the time of creating this, is I'll plan on taking George Kittle at the 3-4 turn. Now, that's becoming something that's a little bit more and more questionable if he'll actually be available for you or not at that turn. He was not in the practice mock draft that we're going to do at the end of this video, and so that's something that I had to live with. And my plan was, if he's not available, I'll probably go quarterback. Now, the reason I'm going to go Kittle over one of these quarterbacks, if all of them are available, first of all, I'm not going to go quarterback and tight end early. That's just not a good strategy. You're missing out on too many of the other positions in your drafts when you do that. I believe, and a lot of people believe that. So there's 3 tight ends in that first tier, and then there's 5 quarterbacks in that first tier-ish. I do actually have them broken up into a tier 1 and a tier 2, but I still consider them all to be close enough to that same tier as one another compared to the rest of the quarterbacks. And so, when you think of scarcity, there's 3 tight ends, 5 quarterbacks. Which one of them is going to give you that positional advantage, which is really what you're hunting for when you're taking one of these positions early, and against more teams, that more opponents in your league, and it's going to be the tight end, because there's fewer of those guys who we think are going to be difference makers at this point. So that's why I lean towards George Kittle. It's a scarcity thing. position-wise to get that advantage against more teams. But the backup plan here will be quarterback if George Kittle's not available, hoping that he is available. He's technically supposed to be around that area of the draft. With that in mind, when we go and we look at the rest of the players available at this point in the draft, this is an area of the draft I don't love the wide receivers. The two that I'm really hoping might be available for me here are Jackson Smith and T. Higgins. So if they're available, great. They're kind of at the top. They're at the top of my list out of the group of wide receivers and running backs that are supposed to be available. If they're both gone, James Cook is next up on my list, and then followed by Omarion Hampton being my other backup plan. And Omarion Hampton's really the only one out of this group that's most likely to be available for me at that point of the draft. In their a worst case scenario, all of those guys are gone, and it comes down to the wide receiver spot. I am probably going to end up reaching for DK Metcalf at this point, if that is how this thing works out for me here. But I'm, hoping that that's not quite the case here, but that's what I would do. So for this portion of the draft, my plan is tight end flex. Now we're going to go and we're going to look at rounds 5 and 6 picks, and then we're going to come back, because what we want to do is try to figure out if we're in our best positions, best situation here in picks in the future rounds. How do we set ourselves up to be able to take advantage of grabbing those positions later and not painting ourselves into any kind of corner? And if you looked, you saw how I end up going here. But I look at the wide receivers, I look at the running backs. In terms of the ones who are supposed to be available, Jameson Williams, George Pickens, Travis Hunter, Jalen Waddle, Isaiah Pacheco, Aaron Jones, Swift, Quinshon Judkins, Caleb Johnson. I'm not a big fan of either the wide receivers or the running backs in this portion of the draft. But George Pickens is supposed to be available. He is the one out of all those names that I actually do desire to have. And in terms of the running backs, if RJ Harvey happens to make it to me here, he is my go, and I'm definitely not opposed to taking Trevion Henderson here if you want to take that upside shot at a running back at this point in the draft too. So those are kind of the wide receiver running back thoughts here. The most likely scenario is going to be a wide receiver. Otherwise, all of my top targets are gone here. I still don't like a lot of these other options more than Calvin Ridley. Calvin Ridley, I will reach for at this point if I must. So that's kind of my draft plan. For a lot of you, you might be looking and saying Jameson Williams, Jalen Waddle. Those are going to be the highest two via the ADP. And via my overall rankings, I also would have those wide receivers over this running back group. So I lean towards wide receiver in terms of the second position that I'm going to get here. We're going to open that up to a flex. If RJ Harvey, Trevion Henderson are available, probably going to go that route. Otherwise, looking like I'll just reach out for Calvin Ridley, and I won't feel too bad about that, actually. He's in that same tier for me. So that's going to bring us on to the first round pick here. So we've got tight end flex, wide receiver flex, first round. We're looking at this. For the wide receivers, these are the names that are supposed to be most likely to be available. Nico, Brian Thomas, London, A.J. Brown. And for the running backs, a pretty big group potentially available, but some of them definitely won't be available in this group as well. But Henry, Ashton Jeanty, Christian McCaffrey, Devon Achane, Bucky Irving, Josh Jacobs. So you're probably not going to get that top tier of running backs, probably not going to get those top tier of wide receivers, of course, when you're drafting from this portion of the draft. So ultimately, what I wrote here is that I'm tempted to go running back, because remember, we leaned in those flex positions a little bit towards the wide receivers being our emergency options. And so running back start does make that less painful at that point in time if things don't go so well and I'm having to reach or anything like that. So, that's kind of where I'm saying if running back works fine here, that's great. However, by the book, I am going to be taking Malik Nabers if he's available. He is on the borderline of potentially being available through this portion of the draft. Or Nico Collins, who is probably supposed to be available with that first pick of ours. Or Devon Achane. Those are my top names. And I'm taking Christian McCaffrey over Achane technically. But Currents Fantasy Pros ADP says McCaffrey won't be available for me, unfortunately. But we'll see. We'll see. He is supposed to potentially be available depending on the platform and how the draft goes, of course, because he does go around that 1-2 turn usually. But Fantasy Pros does have him going a little bit higher now, so I don't know if he's moving up draft boards at this point. That might be the case. Current ADP has Neighbors, Nico, Achane in that order, back to back to back. Just heads up. So I definitely want to walk away with one running back out of this group for sure, namely Christian McCaffrey, Devon Achane. If they both get taken, well, then some sort of wide receiver is probably fallen to me, and I guess we're going to go wide receiver. If I cannot get McCaffrey and or Achane, my primary wide receiver primary wide receiver options are already taken, being like Nico and Malik Neighbors. Then I'm going to be looking at Brian Thomas Jr., Drake London, or A.J. Brown, most likely, which also is not the worst case scenario. But I do want running back, so running back / flex, because if I can get a running back here, that's going to help to ease some of the pressure a little bit later. And in my mock draft, I'm happy for both the wide receiver and running back that I get. And I'm willing to go, once again, running back to start it off and not feel too horribly about it if that's the way that it goes. So, did a test mock draft. I did the mock draft from pick 11. My first pick. Malik Neighbors had went 7th overall, so he's not available. McCaffrey had gone 10th overall, so one spot in front of me at pick 11. He's not available. Nico Collins is still available there. So, playing the ADP here a little bit, I went Nico Collins, risked Devon Achane getting taken by the Team 12 pick there, but Achane was still around after the turn. Perfect. I get my wide receiver. I get my running back. We're happy with it. I would go on McCaffrey over Nico Collins, and then if Achane's there and Nico's gone, I'll go Nico Collins, Achane there, and that would have been running back. So very close to being that route, but didn't have to go that route. Then for my third pick, as we know, the plan was tight end. Kittle got taken mid-third round. He is no longer available, which, once again, I think is more and more likely to happen. T. Higgins and JSN were also both gone. Was hoping that one of them might be available. So this was kind of the first round went pretty darn well. I'm very happy with Nico Collins, Devon Achane. Not absolute best case scenario, but fine scenario. Malik Neighbors, Christian McCaffrey would technically probably be my best case scenario there, and Christian McCaffrey, Achane's fun. My wide receiver options are taken, and then to add to that pain, my boy James Cook was also drafted, probably like one spot before me, because that happened several times throughout this. So Hampton is next up. So it's all good. Hampton's highest up on my board. I have him literally right behind the quarterbacks, but both Burrow and Hurts are still available. I think we can trust that Team 11's not going to take two quarterbacks. Burrow and Hurts are both in the same tier. I do have a preference of Burrow, but if Team 12 takes Burrow and leaves Hurts for me, that's fine. So I went Omarion Hampton there. And then Team 12 did not take any quarterback, so I went with Joe Burrow with my 4th round pick, which brings us to our 5th round pick, which, if you recall, we planned on probably taking a wide receiver here, and then the other spots open, flex, depending on what we've done in the draft so far, depending on who's available even more so. What I will say, in terms of strategy from this portion of the draft, I feel like you are at the mercy throughout a lot of this draft of the rest of the league. So you really do need to stay pliable, keep yourself open, and some of your opinions on that might differ depending on how you feel about some of these other players. If you're a big-time Jalen Waddle or Travis Hunter fan, well, then you're looking around here and saying, I like those wide receivers. You know, if you are a big-time David Montgomery, Isaiah Pacheco fan, you are saying, I'm definitely okay if some of these other guys are gone there, because I still like those guys, you know, roughly in that same tier at the very least of like an RJ Harvey and a Trevion Henderson. I personally don't quite. I think I have them at the top of the next tier, and RJ Harvey at the top of the tier before that. So Picks 5 and 6. Pickens is available. He's on the board as we would expect. As of today, he's somebody who does get quite a bit of buzz. Some people really, really love them, people that are respected. So I do feel like that's something that could continue to push as we get closer and closer to the end of August and some of, the big draft day weekend. I don't need to worry too much based on current ADP of George Pickens getting taken by Team 12 at this point. So I figure I could probably wait to take him around the turn, and I'll look at some of the other positions. So I go and I look at the running backs, and they are picked dry. Not too happy with the running back selection that's left available. Like I said, you're left to the whims of any kind of the rest of your league's draft to some extent. So personally, I would take George Pickens and Calvin Ridley at this point in my draft with picks 5 and 6. What would the average drafter take? However, they wouldn't take those two. They would take some combination of Xavier Worthy, Zay Flowers, Tyrell McMillan, and Jameson Williams. Those are the 4 wide receivers who are most likely to go at this point in the draft via ADP. So what I did is I went Zay Flowers and Tyrell McMillan then after I believe Jameson Williams got taken. Worthy might have still been available there, but I took Tet over Worthy, looking for that long season upside there to pair with the floor of Zay Flowers, and maybe we get lucky. Maybe Zay Flowers does get more touchdowns this year, and then he'll look really good if he does, which is always possible in that offense. So then we look at the rest of my draft, and in this order, I took these players. So came around to the next portion, and I'll put up on the screen what the current draft looks like, my first 6 rounds, up on the screen now. And so for the rest of this draft, I took Jaylen Warren next, and then had a big-time decision. I went Matthew Golden, wide receiver, next. So I took running back, wide receiver, kind of kept my options a little bit more open, because if a run would have happened at either position, they might have gotten a little bone dry for me. Plus, I do like a few more of those later running back options, more so than later wide receiver, like not late, but those middle late wide receiver options. Although there are some of those guys that I want too, and I had to take a risk with my next 2 picks. I went Austin Eckler, Jaden Blue then for those picks. Went running back, hoping that Jaden Higgins would make it to my next pick, and he actually went 1 pick before me, but I don't care. I took Jaden Higgins. I pretended that he made it. Screw it. Just to make this roster a little more lovely for me. So then I got Jaden Higgins there, and I'm just going for some of these wide receiver upside picks because I do have Zay Flowers, I have Tyrell McMillan on this roster specifically, who I'm not super high up on, and if I would have gone Pickens, Ridley, I like them, so I'm willing to take these other shots as well at wide receivers. So different reasons to take the same players. And then Tucker Kraft got at tight end. Tyler Warren was still available. Dalton Kincaid. I actually don't think Dalton Kincaid got taken in this mock draft on Fantasy Pros, but you might want Tyler Warren more than Kraft, and I would draft Dalton Kincaid over Tucker Kraft, hoping for the best. And then what's left at the wide receivers, I have a couple of late wide receiver draft options available, so I was able to kind of pop off a round early and take Baltimore DST and Brandon Aubrey at kicker, and then came around and took Roman Wilson as my final shot for wide receiver because I felt pretty good. I like Jaylen Warren matched up with Omarion Hampton in case Omarion Hampton is going to get off to a slow start. Jaylen Warren's a guy who, if anything, through those 4, 5, 6 weeks first of the season, he's probably going to be the starter in Pittsburgh, and he might be much more valuable then than he is going to be later season, whereas Omarion Hampton could be much more valuable later season than he is earlier season if he gets off to some sort of slow start, whatever the case, especially with Najee there, if he's just not quite what we want him to be where we're drafting him at this point in drafts. So Jaylen Warren was a nice safety pick there, and then Austin Eckler also kind of safe, and then Jaden Blue gives me a little extra pop for the running back room. And for the wide receivers, we kind of talked about those, and then I took one more shot at the end on Roman Wilson. And so if Roman Wilson's my Dark Knight last round pick at wide receiver, if I haven't filled up my wide receiver by that point in the draft that I want to get, and so I was like, you don't hear about Roman Wilson at all. I think that's a mistake, but I'm okay with it because it allows him to be available for me if I want him. if there's another person in your league that happens to take him before you go at the end of the draft, Torrey Horton is probably the other name where if I'm just looking for straight upside, I'm going to grab him over some of those other names that might be available where you know what you're getting. Rashad Bateman, for instance. And I've even heard someone say that they think that because of Clint Kubiak's system, and I think where they're getting this is because of how MVS and Rashid Shaheed targeted Chris Olave a lot of the time last year, is that for Clint Kubiak's system, they think that Torrey Horton could get the most targets in this offense when all is said and done at the end of the year, even more so than JSN. JSN being, I'm assuming this is how they get to that analysis, JSN being the Chris Olave and Torrey Horton being the MVS Rashid Shaheed. Although I don't really think that that's quite exactly what Torrey Horton is. Maybe that's how they use him in this offense, regardless. So, Torrey Horton's a fine option. I like Roman Wilson. And I think that they both provide some upside, but you don't ever hear about Roman Wilson, so I wanted to look at what's the recent news on Roman Wilson. Is it bad? Is it good? Is there nothing coming out? And from Steelers Depot, little short article that I want to share with you. So the Steelers have high expectations for wide receiver Roman Wilson entering the 2025 season, and Wilson had a solid preseason debut. And then the page reloads on me randomly. Drawing praise from quarterback Mason Rudolph. So that's nice. Backup quarterback giving him some praise. All right. Mike Tomlin also offered some praise for Wilson during his press conference ahead of the team's preseason game against the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, downplaying. Now, this is downplaying. That's a very specific word that this writer decided to use. I don't think there's any downplaying technically going on here with Coach Tomlin's comments. There could be. I don't think there is. But Tampa Bay Buccaneers downplaying that Wilson's performance has to do with the absence of Calvin Austin III due to injury. So I assume that there's a question asked is, basically did something along the lines of, did Wilson get the opportunity because Calvin Austin's injured? Trying to ask maybe which one of them is the current starter in this offense is what I would think that reporter was getting at. And I'm not so sure that this response from Mike Tomlin's exactly on the same page as him. And I'll say why right after I start the first half of this quote. So, the response from Tomlin to that is, I think his performance has zero to do with Calvin. Okay, so I take that sentence like, yeah, of course it doesn't. Like, Calvin's on the field, Calvin's on the bench. Why would that have anything to do with Wilson's performance? But I don't think that's exactly answering, what the report is probably asking. Quote unquote, his performance is about his growth and development. Once again, kind of reinforcing what I'm saying is that maybe they're not on the same page. And I like the trajectory of it. There's going to be more to that. So the reasons they might not be on the same page is either maybe Mike Tomlin, he does know which one's going to be the starter, most likely at this point, for their offense at that position for the team. So if he already knows that, he might not have caught on to what the reporter's trying to ask specifically there, and instead he's catching on to regardless of if Calvin Austin had been healthy and he was on the field ahead of Roman Wilson, whenever Roman Wilson got his opportunity on the field, his performance is his own, and that he would have been, relatively impressive. Not that he got a whole lot of opportunities or was ultra impressive out there, but obviously people were happy with what he did on the field, and I thought he had a couple of nice plays. Speaking of that, that's actually kind of exactly where Tomlin goes with the rest of the quote. Oh, the other possibility there would be that just the opposite of that. He already knows that Calvin's ahead, so he's just kind of saying Roman Wilson is growing at his own rate. We're happy with it. Once again, why would it have to do with Calvin Austin? So the rest of the quote: he's made plays when called upon. He's hardworking and available day in and day out. He's bringing a good can-do attitude. He's an example of a second-year guy who, although he didn't have a lot of playing experience last year, it's his second year in the program, and it should show, and it has. So that's one of those quotes you could look at it and you could try to take a negative view on it and say, oh, can-do attitude, good locker room guy. You could look at it like that, but these are the things: hardworking, good attitude. I mean, Mike Tomlin definitely appreciates those things, likes those things, and that definitely matches who Roman Wilson was getting drafted out of Michigan. So I take those quotes, and I do take a good light on that. He's happy with where he's at, despite missing last year in terms of playing time, mentally, and everything. He's where they want him to be. So that's very good. And then the quote, and then there's just that article ends. So I covered the potential for Torrey Horton, a little bit of an update on my boy Roman Wilson there. Was there anything else? A couple of things going back to the draft. For the receivers, I wanted an upside swing at wide receivers, so I went a little bit down the board to take Matthew Golden. So yeah, when I went and took Matthew Golden, I did go actually behind, I think I have Juwan Jennings still ahead of him, and I believe I have Jordan Addison just behind him, but Jordan Addison in his own right could be an upside shot that you could have taken there, so just a couple of other names that were available if you're not like a big Matthew Golden guy there to think of on that roster. At the end of the day for this draft, Fantasy Pros kind of hated it, gave it a C+. You have to work to get those poor grades from them. But I've drafted teams that grade out poorly on Fantasy Pros that have very much represented the teams that I draft at the end of the day, and those teams have been very, very good in the fantasy season. So it does not concern me the least bit. Also, they reward teams in terms of the grade that you give you for having 2 tight ends and 2 quarterbacks, because that goes into the projections for those weeks where you just get a 0 for those otherwise, when they're kind of projecting how many points your team's going to score week in and week out and what that record might kind of look like in terms of part of that grade. The analyst, they'll let you know who liked your draft the most. Jacob Gibbs gave it an A. He liked it a lot, and he is a smart man, so I'm okay with that. At the end of the day, when I looked at the roster, if I were to replace Flowers and Tetairoa McMillan with Pickens and Ridley on it, then I do like the team quite a bit. With Flowers and Tetairoa McMillan, I understand like why people might like those guys more than Ridley, I guess, well, I should say more than Ridley and more than Pickens, I guess. I don't understand that one as much. So, yeah, that's how it ends up looking. Those are kind of my strategies going in. I'm picking from this pick. I'm picking from pick 11, and it's like probably my least favorite pick in the draft after the first round, once we get into those middle rounds and stuff, because I really just start to feel like I question which positions to take. Do I want to draft from this group of wide receivers or this group of running backs? They're not my favorite teams in the world compared to, some of the other mock drafting that I've done from other positions. So hopefully, I don't know. I would be absolutely fine with this team. I just don't get some of the players that I want. I want an RJ Harvey. He just doesn't seem to make it to me where I can get him. Happy to get an Omarion Hampton. Of course, there's some risk there. So there we go. That's it. Thank you very much for tuning on in, and have a good one. Bye-bye. Enjoy your weekend if you're watching this during or before the weekend.